Linda with Thistledown and Company again, and today I'm going to show you how to use Whisper Light Tracer Foundation to make awesome, easy turned edge appliques. Not fusible appliques, turned edge appliques where you have no raw edges and they come out absolutely beautifully, and anyone can do it. You're going to love it. So we'll get started. First, you're going to need a pattern of an applique you want to make. Today, we're going to make a whale. We'll have a whale of a time. Sorry, couldn't help it. To protect your drawing, you'll see why. If it's like in a book or you're borrowing it from someone and you don't want to mar it up, take a page protector and lay it over the drawing. Then you're going to take a piece of Whisper Light Tracer Foundation. It's my product. It comes in 42-inch widths, so it's sold by the yard. So yard is 42 by 36, and it's a super, super lightweight foundation. And this is just one of the many uses. You may have seen some of my other videos. And today we're going to be doing turned edge applique. Lay your Whisper Light over your pattern and just put a couple pins in place. If you have a page protector, you're going to pin right through that too. You don't have to pin a lot, but you don't want it squirreling around while you're trying to trace it. Page protector makes it kind of slippery. I'll put some pins in. Okay, then you're going to take a marker. Now today we're going to be using a turquoise fabric, so I'm not going to use the washout marker today. Today I'm going to use the black friction marker to draw my drawing, and it removes with heat, and it's a nice fine line. It's really a nice marker. So you're going to take this and you're going to trace the applique shape right on the line. Just easy peasy. Just keep tracing. Oops. And if you go off, it doesn't matter a little bit. Just trace where it's supposed to go. Easy to do. Okay. I'm just going to do a little more of this. And I've got one already done, the magic of video. So you can see there's a traced applique. Okay? And you can see because I used a page protector, I didn't mar up my pattern. If I hadn't used a page protector, that would happen. So that's why I say if you want to protect your drawing, use one. If it's your drawing and you're not borrowing it from someone, doesn't matter. Don't use the page protector. So that's the tracing part. So ta-da, there's one all traced. And another nice thing about this technique is if you want to place your applique in a particular spot according to your fabric pattern underneath. In other words, fussy placement. So for this whale, it'd be kind of nice to maybe have that be his eye. Okay? So you can see I've got the eye where I want it to be. And you can kind of see where your applique is. Okay? So you're going to lay it on the right side of your fabric. Now, if you go, oh, do I have this on the right side? Yes, the right side. So when you question yourself, yes, it's on the right side. So you're going to place it where you want it. If you're happy with the placement, then you're going to pin it. And you're just going to pin. You don't have to pin crazy. You are going to be so thrilled with this technique. Everyone kind of, you say needle turned or edge turned applique, and sometimes it sends a shiver down your spine if you've never done it. And it seems like such a mysterious technique. And I've done needle turn applique for many years. And now that I've done this technique, I absolutely love it. And this is what I use all the time. Okay, so we got it pinned to our desired fabric on the right side. Now we're going to stitch directly on the line. So you don't have to worry about guessing or anything else. You're going to stitch right on the line. And you're going to use a matching thread. So in this case, we're going to be using a turquoise thread for the turquoise fabric. So we're going to take it over to our machine. And you can start anywhere. And I'm using a shorter stitch length. I'm using a stitch length of 2 instead of 2.5. And when I get to these tighter curves here, I'm going to shorten my stitch length even more, because stitch length, let me take this back out. Stitch length, when you're going around a tight curve, the shorter the stitch length, the smoother your curve is going to be. If I did this curve with a 2.5 or even a 3, it would be kind of a choppy curve. But because the stitch length is smaller, it's going to go around that curve real nice. Actually, I'll start over here so I can show you that. So I'll start here, and right now I've got it on 2.0 stitch length. So I'm stitching right on the line. And I'm using matching thread. Move your pins as you get to them. So now I'm getting to this tight curve. Now I'm going to reduce my stitch length to 1.5. And just swing it around the curve. If you need to adjust your fabric while you're going around a curve, if your machine has the option of needle down, choose that option. If it doesn't, manually put your needle down before you ever raise your presser foot. Otherwise, you're going to throw off where you're going and you might get a little wobble in your stitching. So always stop with your needle down when you're doing this. Because sometimes it's nice to just stop and let your fabric relax. Pivot slightly. Don't make any giant pivots, because again, then you're going to get kind of choppy curves. So just keep stitching around that tight curve. Now I can go back to a 2.0 stitch length. And so we're going to stitch all the way around on the line. So it's hard to see because I have matching thread, but I'm not going to let you sit and have to watch me stitch the whole way around. So I've got one all set to go. I will show you. Okay, so ta-da! And this one I used white thread so you could see it a little better. The matching thread, you really can't hardly see where I stitched. So this one we've stitched all the way around on the line, didn't leave any openings. The stitches connect all the way around. This is where it overlapped, where I came to the end. Okay, so it's on the right side of your fabric, and we've stitched all the way around. Now, we're going to take a nice sharp little scissors, and we are going to cut it out. You're going to cut it and leave a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance outside your stitching line. Just keep cutting away. And what's nice about turned edge appliques versus fusible appliques, now fusible applique, don't get me wrong, it has its place. And it's quick, it's easy. But with fusible applique, unless it's something you're never ever going to wash, you have raw edges and they fray. So you have to finish the raw edges with a satin stitch, and a satin stitch can be very tedious. And if you don't do it well, it kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. And also fusible appliques aren't as soft. They're not flexible, and they don't have dimension. They're very flat on your quilt. The turned edge appliques, or needle turn as they're known also, are a softer, more dimensional applique. You're going to keep cutting around, and I'll show you what we do when we get to those any points. So if you've never tried applique before, this is the perfect way to start. And once you start this way, you're not going to want to switch, because it is really, really fun. And anyone can do it. It's also great because needle turn applique is very intense on your hands. If you have limited mobility or bad arthritis, this is much easier on your hands instead of trying to take a needle and turn it under. Okay, so we've trimmed away our applique. Okay, now we have to snip these inner curves and the inner points so that when we turn it, it turns smooth. So you just take your scissors and you nip every little bit around the curve. And you want to make sure, of course, you don't cut into your stitching. And you just keep cutting and cut and cut and cut and cut all around the curve. One more over here, two more. Okay, and then here where you have a innie, you're going to clip into that point. And same thing over here by his mouth. You're going to clip in. Don't cut the stitching. And here, because this is a very little area, I'm going to make the seam allowance even a little smaller to reduce the bulk. But that's another nice thing about Whisper Light. There's like virtually no bulk. It's so nice and lightweight. And same thing here. You can cut off the little points where you have points. Okay. Now the magic begins. You're just going to take your scissors and you're just going to slice the Whisper Light. Slice is super easy. Not the fabric, just the Whisper Light. Okay, now you're going to turn it right side too. And start it here. Now the tail, because we're going through a narrow area here, takes a little bit more doing, but not a big deal. Bring it through. And then you can take your purple thing. I love this tool. And most of these notions and tools I do have on my website. My website is thistledownquilts.com. And of course you can find the Whisper Light there too. Here we go. Get that tail through there. Now when you're using the purple thing, there we go. You have to make sure you're poking the fabric and not the Whisper Light, because see, it'll go right through the Whisper Light. So you want to make sure that when you're poking the fabric, you're actually poking the fabric. That's going to help you get that tail through. Oops, wrong guy. See, poking through the Whisper Light. Here we go. It's coming now. See, I didn't want to choose just a super easy, plain old shape for you to show you that even for more complex shapes, it works wonderful. There, we get to the wider part now. Go in there. There we go. Almost through the tunnel now. Now we'll go back in. almost got a tail. Yep. It's gonna start looking like a whale anytime now. Ta-da! Here we go. And you can see we got nice little points where we want to have points. Nice little innie where we want to have an innie. The rest of this is super easy to turn. Here's his little mouth. Okay. There. So now, like I said, you can take your purple thing and run it along the seam allowance in between the fabric and the fabric. I said not between the whisper light. It goes right through. Run it along there. And that's why we clip those curves. So we get a nice smooth curve here. And you can see we have a nice smooth curve because we also did those little stitches. Let's see, just want to tame all this out. Make sure it's all turned up. There we go. Missed that little. There. Okay. So now, we don't want to press on that. Now you can start pressing. And I'm going to put a little snip here to get my purple thing in. Well, where'd it go? There. So I can push these out. Make sure all your... Okay. So now we can start pressing. And I'll do it from this side. And you can press whisper light. Now you don't want to have your iron set to super, super hot. A medium setting is fine. And this way, because it's not a fusible, whisper light has no glue on it. You don't have to worry about mucking up your iron or your ironing surface. See how this is turning out. Turning out wonderful. Okay, and you just keep moving on. And pressing. And you can see all the edges are turned under. Nice and neat and tidy. No raw edges to worry about. I don't know if you've ever tried needle turn applique, but a lot of people find it very frustrating. And this takes that frustration out, but with a very much the same result. Got to get his little lip out there a little more. There we go. And also, this is all pressing down very nice. If you have an area that's giving you trouble, if you spritz it with a little bit of water, cotton is flexible. It's a natural fiber. So when it's wet, you can kind of tame it into submission. So if you have any problem areas, just give it a spritz and then it will behave. So here I want to roll that seam under. And when you use matching thread, you're not going to see those threads, but on this sample I used white so you could see it. But look at that. lovely applique. All the edges turned under neat and tidy. And this was somewhat of a complex shape. You know, it wasn't just a heart or something like that. And you can do this for so many things. Okay, so now that we have our applique all pressed and tidy, you're going to put it on a background, of course. And this is the same whale on a background. Now also, before we continue, I want to show you that, let's see, you can, now when you trace your drawing, it's going to, I trace the drawing and you can see the whale is facing the same way I traced it. Sometimes you want to reverse your applique and have it facing the other way. Well, it's super easy to do. So, here's the same thing, traced it, facing this way. If I want the whale facing the other way, all you have to do is flip it over. So that's a super easy way to reverse your applique design. Trace it and then just flip it because you can see it from both sides. So to reverse your design, trace it and just flip it. And then I would put it on the fabric. Do the same thing I did with this. Put on the fabric, sew all the way around, cut it out, turn it right side too, and then we would have a whale facing the other way. So that's the easy way to reverse a design. So anyway, we have our little whale applique. We put them on a background, and I'm going to be showing you this in more detail. But before I do, you have multiple ways of attaching it to your background. Some people like handwork, some people like machine work. And so, here's where it's not attached. From here, all the way to this thread hanging out, I did hand applique. So that's the same technique you would use for needle turn, but you don't have to sit there and turn the edge under by hand as you go. All the edges are already turned under, and you just stitch away. So that's this section. This section, all I did was edge stitch with a straight stitch and a matching thread by machine. So people that like machine work, there's your machine work. Maybe you want more of a contrast. This black here is blanket stitch by machine. And this was a size 40 thread. The thickness and heaviness of your thread makes a difference too. And you can see this is high contrast, of course. After that, I did blanket stitch by machine with matching thread in a 60 weight thread. And you can see it pretty much disappears. And then for people that also like handwork, this is hand blanket stitching with 2 strands of embroidery floss in black. And of course, you can do it in any color you want. So you have hand blanket stitch, machine blanket stitch matching thread, machine blanket stitch contrasting thread, machine straight stitch matching thread, and hand applique stitch. And that's where it's not stitched down. So we'll go over to the machine and I'll show you how to do a couple of these. Okay, I told you I'd show you how we're going to attach the whale to the block. Now, I'm basting by hand the whale to the background. I prefer basting rather than pins because the basting stitches are super easy to remove and don't get in the way like pins do sometimes. So a lot of times I just like to hand baste my appliques to the background. But you can pin if you want. It's your choice. There's the end of the thread. There we go. So you're just going to baste it down. There's the other tail. Just a running stitch. and that's going to keep it in place as you work. Okay. So it's basted down. And now I'm going to show you the blanket stitch with the 60 weight thread by machine. And what you're going to do is you're going to bring your needle down. Of course, first set your machine to a blanket stitch. And this one, I have it set at the width of 2 and the stitch length at 2. So 2 and 2, you're going to get this size stitch. You can play around on your machine if you have a blanket stitch on your machine and see what you like, because you might want the stitch to go deeper in or further apart, and that would be adjusting your stitch width and your stitch length. So you're just going to stitch right along next to the applique, and the blanket stitch jumps over. You want to go on the slow side so you have some control. So, and as you can see, because I hand basted this, there's no pins getting in the way. So that's what I do recommend doing that. Now, this thread really disappears because it's a good match. You might be tempted to use invisible thread on something like this, but never ever use invisible thread on a child or baby quilt. The invisible thread is so fine and invisible, if it unravels and a piece of it can get wrapped around their little finger or their little toe and you can't see it, or they could, get it in their mouth and you can't see it. So never use invisible threads for babies or children's projects. So just find a good matching thread. And I'll just do a little bit more here. Oops, yeah. Okay, I'll take that out and you can see how it looks. So this is the machine blanket stitch width 2, stitch length 2 with a size 60 thread, and it really secures it nicely. It's not very noticeable. So now we're just going to go to a straight stitch, and I'll do a little bit of that and show you. And then I'm going to show you and then I'm going to show you the hand applique stitch. Because if you've never done applique before and you do want to do hand applique, it's good to know. So this is just a straight stitch, and I'm going to go to a stitch length of 2. And I'm just going to stitch real close to the edge. There's my... This is probably the fastest way to put your applique down. Personally, I like the hand applique or the blanket stitch, but it's your quilt and you can do whatever you like. Okay, I don't spend a lot of time on that, but there you can see the straight stitch right along the edge. So they both secure very well. With a matching thread, they really disappear. Like I said, you can use a contrasting thread if you want, more design element in your stitching. And now I'm going to show you the hand applique. We're going to head over here. Okay, here we are. Now, if you've never done hand applique before, it's a wonderful thing to learn, and it's really not that difficult, especially when you do this easy turned edge applique with the whisper light, because you don't have to worry about turning the edge under as you stitch. So the edges are all turned under. My applique is basted to the background. I've got a matching thread. I'm using an applique needle. These are size 10 Golden Glide applique by John James. So we're all set to go. I have a knot in my thread, and I'm going to come up behind, and I'm going to bring my needle, and I'm going to bring my thread out right at the crease of the fabric, and that's going to bury my knot, my tail. So where you came up in your fabric is where you're going to go down into your fabric. So you're not going to travel forward yet. You're going to go down into the background, right at the edge, and then you're going to travel from the back, and then you're going to come up, and you're just going to catch a couple little threads on the edge fold of your applique. And I'll do this a bunch so you can see. So where your thread is now coming up, that's where you're going to go down. And then you're going to travel under. And then you're going to come up and catch just a couple of threads. And you're using a matching thread, of course. And this is a size 60. Now with thread, the higher the number, the thinner the thread. With needles, it's just the opposite. The higher the number, the bigger the needle. Go figure. Anyway, so you're going to go down where you came up, travel a little bit under, and you want to keep your stitches small. Catch a couple threads, and continue. I mean, you don't want, I'll show you, so you don't want to like travel that far. Then you have big gaps in your applique. So, you know, about 1/4, 1/8 of an inch, somewhere in there. It depends on the size of the piece too. But with the edges turned under, you can see it goes pretty quick. Normally I'd be holding this so I can see it better, but I want you to see it. So it makes a very clean looking edge. You don't see the thread, and it's secured down. There's no raw edges. So that's the whole thing behind hand applique. It's really not a deep, dark, mysterious secret. But I know a lot of people, when they hear that, they tend to shudder and think they can't do it. You can definitely do it. You can do it easily. I'll do one more. And there you are. That is hand applique. So it really is easy, and turned edge appliques without fusible web are much softer. You don't have any of the fusible behind to make it stiff, and it's more dimensional. It's not as flat as a fusible applique. You know, there's a raised up off the fabric. There's some dimension to it. Not a lot, but I mean, you can see that it's just not flat on the fabric. And as far as whether or not, I meant to mention this earlier, whether or not you should trim the whisper light off the back after you turn it right side to, you can and you can't. It's up to you. So you can either leave the whisper light in or trim it away when you're done. So it's so light it doesn't matter. You're not going to feel it in there by any means. So this technique, quilt behind me, this is one I did a few years back. This is called Peekaboo Puss. It's a pattern of mine. And this is all appliqued. And so this is easily doable with the technique I just showed you. Virtually any applique is. And you can do this quilt in black and whites like I did, or you could do some fun brights or anything, but just you want to have a good contrast so that you see the kitties. So give this a try. I know you can do it. And there's another video coming up that you're really going to love too, and it's on making beautiful circles and reverse applique. If you haven't seen reverse applique, it's really cool, and things you can do with that. So we'll be doing that. So take a look at my website, thistledownquilts.com. There we sell the whisper light and some of the notions, and we will see you next time on the next video, and there'll be more. Thanks so much for joining me again. See you later.